My name is Danielle, I'm 25 years old, and on the day I graduated, my phone lit up with a message from my father that froze me in place. Don't expect help. You're on your own. I stood there in my cap and gown, surrounded by cheers and flashing cameras, but all I could hear were those words echoing in my head. The champagne flute glittered like a small galaxy under the rooftop lights, a swirl of gold and stars and expensive pretense, until I saw the white flecks spin through it and sink. It wasn't a bubble. It didn't burst and vanish. Sank slow as a lie. My father's hand withdrew from the stem with the same calm precision he used to initial 9-figure contracts. He turned his wrist, his signet ring flashing, and set the glass back on the silver tray as if nothing at all had happened. I didn't breathe for 3 full seconds. Then my lungs remembered me and I smiled. That's what Harises do when a room is watching. We smile. If you're hearing this, drop your city in the comments so I know where you're tuning in from. And tap like and subscribe because the next 5 minutes are the difference between a headline and a life. I didn't know it yet, but the moment that white fleck spun in my glass, everything I'd been told about family, loyalty, and legacy cracked like sugar glass under a heel. The orchestra on the peninsula's rooftop was playing something warm and expensive. The skyline threw its own party. Windows lit like sequins, the lake a dark silk ribbon at the edge of everything. Waiters moved in soft choreography around ice sculptures and towers of cakes too perfect to taste. A banner I hadn't approved of fluttered in a wind that smelled faintly of wisteria and chlorine. Congratulations, Danielle. My mother's idea, obviously. My mother's ideas always came with photo angles. 2 hours earlier, I'd been a regular graduate with a cap that would not sit straight. Now I was a prop in a production directed by the people who had called me a leech last week. The people who raised me to be useful, quiet, and ultimately compliant, and who watched me closely whenever I refused to be any of those things. The people who, apparently, had just decided the quickest way to regain control was to dust it into a flute and hand it to their daughter. To understand how I got here, you need to know how our house worked. Joseph Harris, my father, built Harris Pharmaceuticals with the grace of a bulldozer and the ethics of a weather system. Whatever kept moving forward was good. Whatever cried about rain should get an umbrella. Publicly, he funded pediatric wings and scholarships with his name spelled in stainless steel. Privately, unforeseen delays fell on competitors, trials found a way to be favorable, and people who asked difficult questions learned to phrase them more politely or not at all. My mother, Eleanor, with an O she corrected even when you spelled it right, was born into a family that believed the past should be lacquered and framed. She merged her legacy company with his, then set about staging our private lives like a glossy spread. Shadowless photos, curated laughter, flowers that looked like they'd been trained. She never sat, she perched. She never scolded, she edited. I was a line she rewrote more than once. There was, of course, Sophia. 3 years older. The kind of daughter that turns cocktail party murmurs into applause. Debate captain, Summa Harvard Business School with honors. A handshake that made board members think of their younger, smarter selves. My parents listened when she spoke. When I spoke, my father turned the page of his paper. That's what we expect from a Harris, he'd say when I brought home perfect grades, and somehow it didn't feel like praise. It felt like inventory. I liked different things. I liked river water samples under a microscope and the hard truth of numbers that didn't care about our last name. I liked spreadsheets that refused to lie. I liked the way a system, any system, behaved when you stopped forcing it to be something else. Environmental science lit up a room in my head that biochemistry only furnished. When I told my father, he laughed without sound. Tree hugger nonsense, he said, which is the kind of phrase you can only say 3 times before it reveals what it's made of. We had a plan, he reminded me. The Harris plan. I would study the right things, I would take the right internships, I would ease into the research division and eventually run it while Sophia ran everything else. I would marry one day and the family photos would be perfect. The future would be a well-set table. My objections were noise. Northwestern took me in anyway. I split my time between courses that thrilled me and ones my parents insisted on to protect their narrative. Biochemistry minor, summer slots at the family company, exposure to how the world really works. At Thanksgiving, my mother would smile and say, "It's not too late to come to your senses," the way people talk to toddlers about naps. By junior year, when I accepted an internship with an environmental nonprofit instead of the Harris pipeline, my father threatened to cut tuition. I took loans. The day I signed the promissory note, something hardened in me in a useful way. No one knew, not even me until I was 16, that my grandmother had been quietly building a separate future. Lillian, my mother's mother, was a chemist whose work lived in the footnotes of men's patents. He kept notebooks that smelled like dust and resolve. She listened when I talked like I was telling her something she might actually use later. Before she died, she set up an ironclad trust. It would open when I graduated or turned 23, whichever came last. It carried a number big enough to buy choices, and a clause that kept it out of my parents' hands unless I never graduated or died before the transfer. 3 months before commencement, the family attorney mentioned the trust in a meeting. Sophia told me later that my father went white in a way a man like him probably hadn't in decades. The trustees were independent, the language was airtight, the money was mine. And there were whispers at the FDA. If I walked away with enough independence to be disobedient, and if I knew even a little about the river by the West facility, my parents' tight choreography could tear. Then the strangest thing happened. They were nice to me. Not warm, not apologetic. The calls softened. The texts asked about your big day. My mother insisted on hosting a celebration befitting a Harris. My father sent a car with a driver who knew when not to speak. It should have felt like peace. It felt like when the room goes quiet because somebody turned off the machine that was masking the noise. Graduation was an orchestra of names and robes and sweaty caps. When the announcer said, Danielle Elizabeth Harris, summa cum laude, I heard Taylor and Zoe scream like salvation from the rafters, and I didn't look at my parents because I already knew what I'd see. Polite hands, neutral faces, the performance of pride. My mother's hug smelled like lilies in control. Could you have done more with your hair? She asked, already scanning for the photographer. The portraits are later. If you're still here, hit the like button. It helps push this story to someone who needs it tonight. I'm about to tell you the part where the mask breaks. The rooftop reception was an expensive theater. Dr. Lewis, an old colleague of my father's who'd defected to academia long enough ago to grow a conscience, found me by the confections. He pressed a water into my hand like a sacrament. You look like you need a drink, he said. A real one. He murmured about guest lists full of regulators and donors, about a company under unusual pressure, about irregularities and closed doors. He didn't say FBI. He didn't have to. Be careful, he added softly. They are especially invested in keeping things the same right now. My parents tracked me through the party like I was moving contraband. Wherever I stood, one of them found a reason to be in my line of sight. At one point I caught my mother staring not at me but at her watch, as if waiting for a cue. When my father tapped his glass for attention, the room fell into that ritual hush money buys. In 15 minutes, he announced, voice warm enough for microphones, a special family toast. He gestured and a head waiter nodded at a bottle with a gold label set aside from the rest. For the family. 15 minutes is a long time when you're counting it. I ducked down a corridor to the staff restroom because the public one had a line and because I needed to breathe in air that didn't know my last name. That's when I heard them. Are you absolutely sure this is necessary? My mother hissed, her voice pitched higher than the one she used on stages. Do you want to lose everything? My father snapped back, quiet but edged. If the FDA finds those numbers, we are finished. Once she has that trust, she's untouchable. Do you want Danielle running around playing whistleblower with $12 million and a grudge? She's still our daughter, Joseph. She's stubborn. He made the word sound like pathology. It's not lethal. It's enough to make her sick to buy a few days. Food poisoning, everyone will nod and send flowers. We move what needs moving before the transfer. If, she breathed and the words scraped, if something goes wrong, it won't. He believed his competence like people believe their gods. I stood very still and learned how to hold fear without letting it spill. The biochemist in me cataloged the plan with an awful, detached efficiency. Anticholinergic? Something that mimics gastroenteritis but hits heart rate? A modified compound from their own shelves, invisible to standard screens. The daughter in me wanted to vomit. Both parts of me agreed on one point. I needed proof. Back by the bar, the special bottle waited. My father hovered near the tray as a bartender poured, inspecting stems like a jeweler. He picked up one flute, tilted it, and his hand did a small, private thing. Like a magician who wants you to watch the scarf, not the sleeve. When he turned, the liquid in that glass flashed dull in the bottom, a faint haze like dust caught in lemonade. He masked it neatly with a smile that could open hospitals and bury rivers. "Taylor," I said without moving my lips. She and Zoe appeared the way friends do when the room turns. "Two things," I murmured, still smiling at a donor whose name I didn't know. "Record the toast. Get my father's hands in the glasses. Keep the file. Send me a backup. And if anything goes sideways, you say the word poison directly to the paramedics and you do not let anyone shame you for saying it." "Danny," Zoe whispered, eyes wide. "Is this a joke?" "I would never joke about cake," I said lightly, and then my father was there, arm outstretched, the glass with the faint cloud presented like a blessing. "To Danielle," he boomed, voice filling the tiles and flowers. "May your future be everything you deserve." Oh, the double meanings we teach our children. Up close, the cloud was undeniable. A curl of something not champagne breathing on the bottom of the flute, refusing to dissolve. My face did what it has been trained to do, softened. My fingers did something else. They didn't touch the rim. "Before we drink," my mother trilled, laying a manicured hand on his sleeve, a few words. He slipped into his public dialect. "Danielle has always been determined," he said, "and if you know this dialect, you know that determined means disobedient and unconventional means ungrateful." He slid Sophia into the speech halfway through like a control group, a true Harris, an example of loyalty, and the room murmured the way rooms do when they don't hear the subtext. That's when I moved. I turned toward my sister with a brightness I didn't feel. "I wouldn't be here without Sophia," I said, and the crowd did their polite, knowing "oh." I stepped in, traded her half-empty flute for mine with a gesture my mother would have taught me if it had been harmless, graceful, generous, camera-ready. "Take mine," sophomore father set aside the good stuff. For a heartbeat, Sophia's face opened in confusion. Then training smoothed it into acceptance. She raised the glass, the wrong glass, the one that wasn't supposed to have her name on it. "To family," I said, looking into my father's eyes for the first time that night. The part of his face that moves only during mergers twitched. My mother's fingers tightened on crystal. The orchestra hung on a note as if the air had a throat. "To family," Sophia echoed and drank. I sipped the safe champagne she'd been holding. The sugar tasted like tin. Conversations resumed. The music swallowed the hush. People said the usual things about bright futures and proud parents. I moved through them as if I were wearing a borrowed body. Guilt and calculation fought quietly in my chest. I had just let my sister drink something my father meant for me. I had done it because evidence and survival sometimes point to the same door, and I had done it because I wanted him to see what he'd done, framed by the only mirror he couldn't ignore. His favorite child. 28 minutes later, the first sign arrived as if on cue. Sophia swayed mid-sentence. Her hand went to her forehead like she'd been tapped with a bell. "I feel weird," she said to a junior associate who looked like he'd forgotten his own name. "Like the room is," she fumbled for the word, "slanted." I was already moving. Her pupils were wide. A flush crawled up her neck. Her pulse under my fingers pounded like a sprint. "Help," the associate said, thin and high. "Something's wrong." My parents materialized. Panic broke through polish. My father's jaw was a locked hinge. My mother's mascara made dark parentheses under her eyes. Dr. Lewis knelt, old reflexes waking as he freed her collar button. "Rates fast and irregular," he said. "Call emergency now." "The champagne," someone offered. She had the champagne. My father looked at me then, really looked, and the hatred, there was a bright, clean thing that almost impressed me. "What did you do?" I didn't blink. "She drank from my glass," I said quietly. "The one you handed me." He didn't deny it. He couldn't, not with the cloud still imagining itself harmless at the bottom of his skull. "The ambulance is 4 minutes out," a waiter reported, voice trembling. "I'll go down," I told them. "I know the fastest way through the service elevators." My mother nodded without hearing me. Dr. Lewis mouthed, "Go." In the elevator I called Taylor. "Lobby." "No." "Video ready." "Use the word." They were waiting by the revolving doors, faces set, phones ready. When the paramedics jogged in, I met them with a calm I borrowed from the part of me that labels tubes and burns midnight oil. "Female, mid-20s, sudden onset dizziness, confusion, tachycardia," I said. "Onset approximately 30 minutes post-ingestion of champagne." Suspect anticholinergic or related compound. Potential research-grade agent. May not show on standard panel. The lead medic's eyes sharpened. You a nurse? Biochemistry, I said. Harris Pharmaceuticals. It tasted wrong to use the name that way, but the medic understood that words can be keys. Upstairs was noise. The gurney, the barked numbers, the way rooms shrink when the person on the floor is beloved by the wrong people. They loaded Sophia. My mother wept. My father's hands were too still. In the ambulance bay, a medic asked, "Family?" And my mother climbed in with a grace that seemed impossible for a woman whose world was breaking. "We'll follow," my father said and grabbed my arm hard enough to print his fingers. All of us. Northwestern Memorial choose chaos for breakfast. The ER lights are different from party lights. They don't flatter. They reveal. As they wheeled Sophia away, I did not chase the gurney. I went to the nurse's station and spoke in the dialect of triage. "I have information about a possible toxin," I said. Non-commercial analog of an anticholinergic agent. Likely cyclopentolate adjacent or a tailored derivative. Cardiac effects in addition to CNS. Dosage designed to mimic gastroenteritis. The charge nurse looked at me like I'd thrown a pass she wasn't sure she should catch. Then she picked up a phone. 5 minutes later, a physician with tired eyes that still cared introduced herself as Dr. Patel. "Tell me everything," she said, and I fell into it. The rooftop, the glass, the overheard words, the symptoms, the timing. She asked precise questions and wrote with the small, efficient script of a person who has no time to write wrong. "We'll run targeted talks and treat symptomatically while we wait," she said. "If it's what you think, we'll also notify the police." "You'll want the video," I said. "And the glass if it still exists." I texted Taylor. She replied with a link before my finger left the screen. The file had my father's ring, the cloud in the flute, the switch, and Sophia's smile like a blade at her throat. A detective with kind eyes that didn't let you mistake her for soft arrived before the labs came back. "Rivera," she said, offering a card with a thumb crease. "Walk me through it again." I did. She listened without interrupting, except to anchor a time or confirm a phrase. When I finished, she tapped the card twice against the folder and said, "If you're right about the compound, this isn't just assault. It's a felony with a special kind of intent." My parents arrived with an attorney in a suit that looked like it billed by the minute. My mother played bewilderment with tears that might have been real this time. My father's face was a winter field. "My daughter is unwell," he told Detective Rivera in the tone he used with wayward vendors. "We will not participate in theater." "We have preliminary lab results," Dr. Patel said, materializing like an argument you can't ignore. "Modified anticholinergic. Not commercially available. Close enough to cyclopentolate to respond to physostigmine. We're administering now. She's stable for the moment." Rivera's eyes flicked to me, then to my father. "Not commercially available," she repeated. "Interesting. Wonder where someone would get that." My father's lawyer placed a card on the counter like a magician, revealing nothing. "All questions through me," he said without looking at me. "Here's a question," I said before I could file the impulse. "Do the police want the part where he tried to make me drink it on camera, or do we save that for later?" Rivera didn't smile. He didn't need to. "We'll take it now." The hours bent. Somewhere in the middle of them, Dr. Patel slid into a small family consult room with graphs and certainty. "If you hadn't told us where to look, we could have lost precious time," she said. "There may be temporary arrhythmias, she'll need monitoring. But she should recover. Relief is its own drug." I let it hit me. Then I braced for the next dose. "You realize," Detective Rivera said gently once Dr. Patel left, "that by your own account you allowed your sister to drink from a glass you believed was compromised." "I made the worst good decision available," I said. "If I'd refused, he would have tried again. Without the video, there is no case. Without the symptoms, there is no test. I picked the option that ended in a hospital, not a morgue." "I need you to say that again on the record," she said, and I did. When they finally let me see Sophia, she was pale against white sheets, dark lashes making crescents on her cheeks. Her hand was warm in mine. "Is it true?" she asked when her eyes fluttered open. Dad, was it really you?" "It was meant for me," I said, and even now I wanted to protect her from the word poison. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "You shouldn't have had to choose," she murmured. Her mouth trembled. I saw numbers in a folder last month. Discharge reports. Metals in water. I thought it was a mistake. I asked once. He told me not to worry about what I didn't understand. Do you understand now? Her answer was a single small nod that felt like a curtain falling. Outside the room, the corridor hummed with hospital noises that had nothing to do with us. Beeps like small birds, squeaking wheels, someone laughing at a bad joke because bad jokes are lifelines at 2 a.m. My mother sat at the far end, a tissue pressed to her mouth. My father stood like a statue of a man who bought statues. The attorney worked a phone, eyelids at half-mast. Detective Rivera spoke into a recorder in a voice that made the words stay put. If you're still with me, comment with the one decision you made that changed your life even if no one saw you make it. And subscribe because I'm going to show you how a rooftop toast turned into a federal case. And how the truth when you say it out loud can be the most dangerous and the most liberating thing in the room. I didn't sleep that night. In the small hours, Rivera returned with a new folder and a deeper calm. One more thing, she said. You're not the only investigation. The Bureau has been looking at Harris Pharmaceuticals for months. She didn't say the letters. He didn't have to. Your parents have a lot of rooms with a lot of doors. We're about to open some. The first door was the special glassware, bagged and labeled by a meticulous nurse who had the soul of an archivist. The second was the video already backed up 3 times. The third was a storage unit that didn't belong to me with my name on it, discovered later and filled with other plans for other days. But those are part 2 problems. For now, this is where I leave you. In a hospital corridor that smells like sanitizer and coffee, with a sister asleep and a detective writing down the kind of facts that change the shape of a family. The rooftop party is over. The music has stopped pretending it knows how the night ends. The truth is tasting the air. If you want to know what we found when the doors opened, how the food poisoning story unraveled, how a river remembers what is poured into it, and how a legacy can become evidence, tap subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Like this video so it reaches the next person who needs to see that you can step out of a script even when the author is your father. And tell me where you're watching from. I'm reading every city like a map out of the house I grew up in. Because the most powerful antidote to poison is not in a vial. It's in the record. I didn't go home that night. Hospitals have a way of turning time into a hallway with no windows, and I walked it until my phone told me morning had decided to try again. Sophia slept in a soft tangle of wires and blankets, color returning to her face by degrees. Dr. Patel checked the monitors in a rhythm that made me trust machines I couldn't name. Detective Rivera drifted in and out with questions that narrowed like a funnel. When did he hand you the glass? Who else touched it? Who poured? Who looked away at the wrong moment? Taylor and Zoe camped on those plastic chairs that punish loyalty. The video sat in 3 clouds and 2 hard drives because when the truth is fragile you dress it in redundancy. At 6:13 a.m. a lab tech in scrubs printed with tiny comets delivered an update that felt like oxygen. Physostigmine had pulled Sophia back from the cliff, her rhythm had settled, and the preliminary tox report matched what I had guessed in the worst moment. An anticholinergic cousin to cyclopentolate, modified in a way that hid from standard screens but played by the same physiological rules. Dr. Patel didn't hand me a medal for guessing right. She handed me ice water and told me to drink it. Smart doesn't metabolize adrenaline, she said, half a smile reminding me she had learned that the expensive way. Rivera brought me into a small room that smelled like lemon cleaner and worry. I need your full statement recorded, she said, setting a little black device on the table. The red light blinked like an unblinking eye. I told it everything. The overheard corridor conversation, the gold-labeled bottle, the cloudy bottom of the flute, the switch I would think about for the rest of my life. I didn't skip the part where I had chosen evidence and survival over certainty. I didn't soften the fact that my sister was in a hospital bed because I had bought us a case with her body. Rivera didn't flinch. He pressed once on whether I knew it might be fatal. I answered the only way I could. He told my mother it was non-lethal. He's lied to me before. I chose the only door that ended with someone calling 911. They took the glass. The head bartender, whose life would be divided into before and after his meticulousness saved a chain of custody, had set aside the family tray, the special bottle, the napkin my father set his hand on. Someone with careful hands photographed a faint ring print on crystal. Someone else logged times like they mattered, they do. Dr. Lewis wrote a statement that turned rumor into observation and observation into suspicion with the authority of someone who had built his career on molecules and regret. Outside the automatic doors, press had sprouted overnight like mushrooms after rain. My mother gave a statement through her tears about unthinkable tragedy and mystery illness. My father stood 10 feet away, jaw clenched, hands civilized. Their attorney said phrases that were designed to freeze. No comment, baseless, defamatory. And reporters wrote down every word because we pretend neutrality when the truth hasn't finished walking into the room yet. By mid-morning, a man in a Navy windbreaker introduced himself as Special Agent Donovan. He didn't flash a badge, he let the weight of the letters do the work. He asked if Detective Rivera could share my video. She could and did. He asked if I understood that what happened on that roof wasn't isolated. I said I had spent 4 years understanding things a day too late. We've had questions about Harris Pharmaceuticals for a while, he said, which is a polite way of telling someone their house has been vibrating and they mistook it for traffic. Your parents are careful. But careful leaves a pattern. He smiled without showing teeth. Careful is our favorite. Sophia woke long enough to squeeze my fingers and try a joke she didn't finish. You always wanted me to notice the water, she whispered, and then slept because recovery is boring and the body insists on it. I texted Aunt Patricia, the one person on my mother's side who spoke to me like a person, and she replied with plain emojis and a promise I believed before I saw her boarding pass. Taylor and Zoe rotated food, chargers, and hugs with military efficiency. On the third coffee, I made them promise to go shower and sleep. We will if you will, Taylor said. We all lied. Rivera asked if I would come downtown for a formal interview. It's the same questions, she promised. Just with better microphones and worse chairs. On the way, she sat in the passenger seat of a city pool car and explained, chain of custody, like a bedtime story for grown-ups. It's not enough to know, she said. You have to be able to prove knowing in a way even a jury having a bad day can't ignore. The interrogation room was warmer than TV rooms, with the kind of pen that won't explode even when your life does. I signed too many places. We dated the page like dates were nets. There's a specific humiliation in saying out loud that your father tried to poison you. It's different from calling him cruel or cheap or selfish. It rearranges your childhood in retrospect like furniture in the dark. Here is a memory of him teaching you to swim. Here is a suspicion he would have held you under if paperwork told him to. I told the room about holidays where applause was a currency and I was consistently broke. I told it about the internship I turned down, the loans I took, the way my mother's voice climbed half an octave when she had to say, environmental science in front of donors. I said the numbers out loud. 12 million 1 week until transfer, the timing like choreography. Rivera didn't write 12 million, she wrote motive. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself. Hit like if you want part 3 to go live the moment it's ready. YouTube needs that nudge to send this to someone who's staring at a family table and not sure where to put her hands. When we drove past the Harris Tower, agents in windbreakers were already flooding the lobby like a tide in sensible shoes. Search warrants read out in tones that pretended to be polite. Our general counsel tried to argue privilege with a face like the inside of a freezer. A woman from the bureau with a ponytail mechanically perfect enough to signal competence explained that privilege doesn't cover racketeering. In the lab building, technicians watched men with gloves collect things that had once felt like the future. A junior scientist with acne scars and an iron shirt asked me if this meant he would lose his job. If you were honest, I said, I am going to do everything I can to make sure honesty is employable. My father called me from a number I didn't recognize. There's still a way through this, he said without hello, because apologies were not a language he ever cared to learn. You are young, you are emotional, you've always wanted attention. You will say you were confused. You will retract. We will move forward as a family. As a family, I repeated, tasting each word like it might bite me. Which part is the family, the part where you dosed my drink or the part where you watched Sophia swallow it? A mistake, he said, and I realized how those two words could be a religion. One where confession is for cowards and absolution is automatic. Don't call me again, I said and hung up. I blocked the number. I didn't block the rage. Agent Donovan called that evening. We found a storage unit, he said, casual and not at all casual. Rented under your name. My name. I had to sit down before the room learned how to spin. 6 months ago, he said. Digital lease. Your email. Your bank card. I'm telling you because I prefer you hearing it from me. And because you want me to come see it, I said. And because your reaction is evidence, he said, not unkindly. The unit was out by a stretch of highway where storage facilities multiply like unambitious dreams. A roll-up door rattled as an agent unlatched it. Inside, boxes labeled in a hand similar to mine if you squinted through malice, an old laptop with stickers that had never touched my fingers, plastic bins with lab vials nested in foam. Temperature-controlled coolers purred. A clipboard clipped to a shelf with my forged signature looping confidently where mine would have printed. It was, I had to admit, a good setup. "What is this?" I asked, trying not to put my hands in my hair because we were surrounded by powder and glass and a future that might be allergic to me. "I've never been here." Donovan watched me the way people watch waves, trying to decide if they're pretty or dangerous. "Plan C," he said. Plan A was leverage. Plan B was character assassination. Plan C is framing you and letting the press do the rest. He's a planner. He's a coward, I said, and then, because accuracy matters, he's a dangerous planner. Forensics photographed each box like it had rights. They lifted prints, and for a second I thought, what a strange verb. Lift like an assist, until I saw how the black powder revealed hidden touch. They cataloged serial numbers on equipment that looked like the distant cousins of the machines I loved. They logged each vial against a list that hadn't been invented until this moment. A woman in a bun that never moved asked me to sign a sheet that said I had watched them. Be careful. I watched harder. Sophia woke as the hospital admitted decided she could be moved out of acute monitoring. Aunt Patricia arrived in a coat that promised warm casseroles and sharper words. She hugged me the way some people remember you are made of bones before they squeeze. "I should have taken you girls years ago," she said into my hair. "Your mother made it hard to find the door." "She still does," I said. "But the hinges are different now." Sophia cried when I told her about the storage unit. Not because she thought I could have done it, because she understood how close we'd come to a different story, one where my name is a headline written by someone who never learned me. "I signed off on documents I didn't read," she whispered. "I was so sure they would never ask me to be anything other than perfect." She turned her face toward the window. "Being perfect is a drug." "The side effects," I said, and she laughed once without joy. The Tribune ran a piece that first evening that called our rooftop party opulent and our family complicated, and used the phrase alleged poisoning because that's what good lawyers teach good editors to do. An op-ed 2 days later asked what kind of daughter switches glasses. The comments answered in every kind of ugly. I stopped reading, but the words still found me. Zoe took my phone and replaced my lock screen with a photo of the lake at dawn. "Focus on water," she said. "It's your brand." The Bureau executed search warrants at our house while I stood in the hospital cafeteria considering whether coffee could be legally classified as a coping mechanism. Boxes came out labeled with things like Q3 trial notes and vendor compliance, labels my father thought would put people to sleep. One of the agents texted a photo to Donovan, who showed it to Rivera, who showed it to me. It was a notebook, cracked leather, old and honest. On the first page, my grandmother's careful script. On the last, a sentence that felt like a benediction. "I have arranged for Danielle's independence. She will need it to break what I could not." I cried in a bathroom stall like a person in a movie who forgot she wasn't a person in a movie. When I came out, a nurse handed me a paper towel like it was a medal for remembering to breathe. The days collected. Sophia stabilized enough to be angry, which is a sign of life. The detectives built timelines on whiteboards. A line for my father's lab access, a line for the bottle delivery, a line for the family's arrival time and who carried which coat. Emails surfaced where compliance officers were told to massage numbers until they stopped making people uncomfortable. Environmental sampling reports from the West facility reappeared like ghosts who had learned how to text. Heavy metals in water. Suppressed studies. Settlement, as a verb you don't want to meet in an alley. Donovan sat me down with a laptop and 2 agents from cyber whose humor was so dry it was almost a fire hazard. "Your email was used to open the storage unit," one of them said, "but it was opened from an IP address that belongs to a law firm your father uses. The card on file is a prepaid that was purchased in cash 3 blocks from your office. The geolocation pings during the purchase are for your father's phone. We like when the pattern is willing to hold still." "So do I said, and felt something like my shoulders lower for the first time in days. Rivera asked if I was willing to wear a wire if my father tried again. "He might want to fix this," she said, fingers drawing quote marks in air like knives. People like him confuse control with safety. I said yes because the part of me that prefers numbers to drama also prefers outcomes to wishes. I wore the device to a diner where he liked the pie and the waitress called him sir, in a way that gave him a high. He arrived late. He ordered coffee he didn't drink. He said words that filled a transcript. Retract, family, loyalty, misunderstanding. He did not say sorry. He did say money. He did offer me a job I already had under different terms. Compliant daughter, quiet scientist, name on a door that locked from the other side. The device hummed the way truth hums when it knows it's being collected. We didn't arrest him then. Patience is a tactic and so is gravity. The bureau wanted the paperwork, the signatures, the chain that wound from a rooftop flute to a river that remembered who had poured into it. My job was what it had always been. Notice and notate, survive and say so, hold my sister's hand. Some nights I slept in a chair by her bed and woke to find her staring at the ceiling with that look people get when good dreams are braver than they are. What will we be when we're not theirs? She asked once at 3 a.m. I don't know, I said. But we will pick. That's new. A week after the party I got an email from the trustees of my grandmother's fund. The subject line was procedural. The content was a rope thrown from a solid shoreline. In light of extraordinary circumstances, the board had voted to accelerate the transfer. It hit my account like a secret re-entering the room legally. Money doesn't fix family. It does fix leases and lawyers in the way your stomach drops when you think about bills. The first thing I did was call a victims clinic in a town downstream from the West facility and ask what they needed. The second was set aside an account with Sophia's name on it because recovery is expensive in ways you don't expect. The third was hire an attorney who spoke to me like a person, not a press release. The fourth was sit still in front of the lake and decide I would not spend the rest of my life fighting Harris Pharmaceuticals in courtrooms. I would fight them in water samples and remediation plans and the kind of boring meetings where the most ethical person wins if she refuses to get tired. Redemption isn't a currency, it's a schedule. The day the bureau served a second set of warrants, my father didn't come home. His attorney said it was a misunderstanding. His assistant said he was in meetings. My mother said nothing. The truth was more ordinary. He was in his office rearranging papers like that could stop time. Rivera called me with a voice that had something like relief in it. We have him, she said. Your mother too. I didn't cheer. My body did something small and private I will never be able to describe properly. I told Sophia first. She closed her eyes and 2 tears slid out like they had been waiting their turn since childhood. At intake they took his belt and his cufflinks and the ring that had flashed when he poisoned a flute. At home, the housekeeper boxed up clothes that looked like success and smelled like cologne. The press used words like empire and collapse. In the hospital, Dr. Patel adjusted a dosage and told Sophia she hated media days because they stole attention from patients who needed it and didn't have last names. She's one of us now, she said, nodding at me. People who do boring things that matter. 3 days later, Rivera stood in front of me with a folder that was thicker than a book but thinner than the story. There's something you should see, she said. And there's something I have to tell you before you see it. We drove back to the unit by the highway. The late afternoon light made the corrugated doors look like an art project about secrets. Rivera unlocked the latch with a key that had been bagged and tagged. Inside it looked unchanged. Boxes, vials, a laptop, the neat malice of forgery. She handed me a printout. It was the lease again, the digital signature, the payment log, the IP address. She flipped to a bank transfer I didn't recognize. Someone moved $5,000 from your checking account, she said, to an account that paid for this unit. I didn't, I started, then stopped because she knew that. We know, she said. We tracked it. The authorization came from a device cloned to your phone number. She held my eyes until my breathing matched something you could measure. I'm telling you because the grand jury will see it. I'm telling you because your father's defense will try to argue reasonable doubt. And reasonable doubt loves a forged trail with your name on it. So what happens? I asked, not sure which of the 10 possible disasters I was inviting by speaking in plural. What happens is we keep pulling, she said. And you do not let the fear of a headline keep you from testifying. I looked at the vials in their foam beds. One of them was half empty, cotton at the mouth stained the faintest yellow. There was a label in a handwriting almost like mine. Brine. Trial. The viciousness of that detail would not leave me for a long time. They had named it something harmless. They had named it after salt water. Danielle, Rivera said quietly. There's more. Agent Donovan appeared in the doorway like punctuation. He held a printout of an email I had never sent to a reporter I didn't know. It contained a paragraph of true things about the river and 3 sentences that would, if published, compromise active warrants. It looked like a leak. It looked like I had done it. This went to a journalist at 8 this morning from your account, he said. We already have the trace. But the newsroom has an ethics policy. If it runs fast. And if it runs, your father's counsel will say you are orchestrating all of it for attention and money. What do? I asked. My voice sounded like a stranger's. You go on the record with us, now, Rivera said. You authorize us to release a summary that protects the investigation and clears you of the leak. And then you prepare for them to accuse you anyway. On the drive back, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I used to know by heart. You think you're winning because you've never learned to count. I stared at it until the screen went dark. He's under phone restrictions, Rivera muttered when I showed her. But monsters find loopholes. She took the phone and handed me a baggie with a new one. Use this. For now. At the hospital, Sophia was sitting up, her hair in a messy knot I had never seen when we lived at home. She looked at the new phone and the old fear in my face and opened her arms. We're going to be okay, she said, and for once it didn't sound like a lie people tell you to make the moment pass. We're going to be okay because we're telling the truth and because we're telling it to people who know what to do with it. I believed her until the TV in the corner changed to a breaking news graphic and a chirrun that stole my breath. Source close to case alleges daughter staged poisoning. Leaks confidential info. A reporter in a coat that cost more than a month's rent said my full name. She said words like attention, unstable, jealous. She said the email had come from my address and my father's counsel had expressed deep concern for Danielle's mental well-being. The room felt smaller than physics should allow. I paced, then forced myself to stop because pacing doesn't enlarge a room. I called Rivera on the new phone. I saw it, she said. We're moving. 5 minutes later my new phone rang again. Not Rivera. Not Donovan. A voice I would know in nightmares. If you want this to end, my father said calmly, like he was offering a menu, come to the Oak Ridge warehouse. Tonight. No police. Rivera shook her head when I repeated it. No, she mouthed, already texting. Donovan's fingers flew. I turned away from the bed so Sophia wouldn't see my face do fear. If you're still here, I said to the camera that isn't in the hospital room but might as well be, hit subscribe. Part 3 is where we stop letting him choose the room. I took a breath that felt like the first breath of winter. And it's where I find out what else he left in my name. The hallway lights hummed. The new phone was warm in my palm. Outside, the city made the sound cities make when they are about to witness something and haven't decided who they'll believe. I picked up my coat. Rivera handed me a transmitter the size of a breath mint. Donovan adjusted his holster and said, he picked the warehouse because he thinks it's empty. Is it? I asked. Not for long, he said. We stepped into the elevator that would carry us to a night my grandmother would have understood better than anyone. Somewhere between floors I remembered to say it out loud for the people who needed permission to stop whispering. Like this so it reaches someone who thinks she's alone. Tell me where you're watching from so I remember we're not. The doors opened on the lobby. The glass doors reflected 3 versions of me. The daughter, the scientist, the witness. The air outside was colder than it had any right to be. Sirens wailed somewhere else for someone else. The car doors clicked in unison. The city unspooled ahead. And the warehouse waited with my name on it. The drive to Oak Ridge was a study in controlled tension. Rivera sat in the front passenger seat, her gaze fixed on the GPS as if sheer willpower could keep every light green. Donovan drove like a man who knew exactly how much speed you could get away with before inviting unwanted attention. I was in the back, my hands curled in my coat pockets, fingers wrapped around the transmitter. We didn't talk much. Not because there was nothing to say but because every word we spoke could remind us of what could go wrong. Remember, Rivera said finally, glancing back at me, we're only here because you have something he wants, your compliance. The second you feel unsafe we pull you out. I don't think he'll give me that choice, I said. Then we'll make the choice for you, Donovan said without looking away from the road. Oak Ridge's industrial district was half empty even on its busiest days. But at night it was another world entirely. all hollow buildings and security lights that hummed against the silence. The warehouse loomed ahead, corrugated steel catching the pale orange glow of a single street lamp. Rivera's phone buzzed. "Units in position," she murmured, then turned to me. "You'll go in first. We'll have eyes on you the whole time. Stall him if you can. The more he talks, the more rope he gives himself." We parked a block away. The plan was simple. I'd walk in through the front, wearing the transmitter. They'd monitor from a surveillance van nearby. Inside, I'd keep my father talking long enough for them to gather enough probable cause for a clean arrest. Simple in theory. The front door was propped open with a wooden wedge as if the building was expecting me. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of machine oil. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching long from the overhead lamps. And then I saw him. He was standing near a folding table in the middle of the open space, hands in his pockets, looking like a man waiting for a late lunch appointment rather than a confrontation that could end his life as he knew it. "Danielle," he said smoothly. "You came. You asked," I said. "I figured you wouldn't take no for an answer." A faint smile. "I admire that you still understand me." "I understand you better than you think," I replied. "You wouldn't have called unless something's slipping through your fingers." He chuckled. "Always sharp. Yes, things are complicated. Your stunt with the Bureau accelerated timelines I would have preferred to control. And then there's the problem of perception. People are starting to believe you." I didn't answer. Let him fill the silence. He moved closer, the sound of his shoes deliberate against the floor. "I can fix this for both of us. There's still a way to make the narrative work. One in which you're not a rogue scientist turned attention seeker, and I'm not a man accused of harming his own family." "And what's the cost?" I asked. "Public contrition. A joint statement. You admit to being misled by outside influences. Those friends of yours, the so-called detective. In exchange, we settle the civil cases quietly, the criminal charges fade with time. You'll be in the fold again with all the resources you've suddenly discovered you enjoy." I let the disgust show in my voice. "You think this is about resources?" "It's always about resources," he said almost gently. Behind me, the faintest pop of static in my earpiece told me Rivera and Donovan were catching every word. I took a slow breath, remembering her advice. "Stall him." "You said this was about ending it," I said. "I assume there's a stick to go with this carrot?" He tilted his head. "I'm not threatening you, Danielle. But I am reminding you that the court of public opinion moves faster than the legal one. The leak was effective. Imagine a few more like it, each one carefully framed to make you look unstable. The Bureau might start wondering if they've backed the wrong witness." "You mean framed," I said flatly. He smiled. "Call it whatever you like." I took a step closer as if conceding ground. "You've planned this, haven't you? All of it. The storage unit, the forged transfers, the doctored emails. You've been building a version of me that only exists in your head." "Correction," he said. "I've been building a version of you that people will believe. Truth is irrelevant if perception is absolute." In my ear, Rivera's voice was a whisper. "Keep him talking, you're doing fine." "And Sophia?" I asked, letting my voice drop. Was she just expendable? His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "Sophia wasn't supposed to drink from that glass. That was an unfortunate variable. But she's alive, isn't she? And if she plays along, she'll stay that way." That was it. The moment I knew there was no coming back from this conversation. "You're threatening her," I said. "I'm making you an offer," he countered. "Your cooperation buys her safety. Your defiance guarantees complications." The pause in my ear told me Rivera was processing that in real time. "2 more minutes," she murmured. I shifted my weight, buying time. "And if I say no?" His smile thinned. "Then we stop playing polite." He reached into his coat pocket, too quickly. My pulse spiked, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small black device and set it on the table between us. "A phone." He slid it toward me. "Call whoever you want," he said. "Tell them you've had a change of heart. I'll even let you leave here tonight without an escort." "Generous," I said. "Practical," he replied. "You're more useful alive." The static in my earpiece changed. A barely audible double-click, that was the go signal. I kept my eyes on him. "You know what, Dad?" I said softly. You always told me the smartest person in the room was the one who controlled the ending. I think you just lost that title. The sound of boots on concrete cut through the air. Voices barked commands. Federal agents. Hands where we can see them. His eyes flicked toward the shadows just as Rivera emerged, weapon drawn. Donovan followed, flanking from the opposite side. Within seconds, 2 more agents had him in zip ties, his hands yanked behind his back. He didn't fight. He didn't even look surprised. As they read him his rights, he turned his head toward me and said almost conversationally, "You think this is over? You have no idea how many doors I left unlocked." I didn't answer. Outside, the night air felt colder than it had when we arrived. The adrenaline left me shaky but not weak. Rivera clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You did good in there. Got more than we hoped." Donovan added, "We'll process him tonight. The DA will want you prepped for grand jury testimony." I nodded, but my mind was already elsewhere. On Sophia, on the possibility that he wasn't bluffing about those unlocked doors. As they loaded him into the transport van, he glanced back one last time. And even in cuffs, he managed to make it feel like he was still playing a game I hadn't seen the full board for. Back in the surveillance van, Rivera handed me a bottle of water. "You all right?" "No," I said honestly. "But I'm still here." She smiled faintly. "That's enough for now." The ride back was quieter. The city lights slid past in streaks, and somewhere behind them the warehouse stood empty again, at least physically. For me, it would never be empty. It would always be the place where I saw my father's mask drop entirely. When we got back to the hospital, Sophia was awake. I didn't tell her everything, just that he was in custody, that she was safe tonight. She reached for my hand. "You look tired," she said. "I am," I admitted. "Good," she murmured. "Means you're still fighting." And I was. Because I knew, in the pit of my stomach, that even with him in a cell, the story wasn't over. Those unlocked doors he'd talked about? They were real. And sooner or later we'd have to face whatever was waiting behind them. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of Sophia's hospital room. She was sitting up, sipping tea, the faintest trace of color back in her cheeks. For a moment, I let myself believe we'd reached the end of something dark. But hope can be cruel like that. My phone buzzed, a restricted number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A voice, low and unfamiliar, said, "Your father sends his regards." And then the line went dead. The sound was like ice water in my veins. He was in federal custody. He should have no way to reach me. And yet, somehow, his shadow had slipped through the bars. I didn't tell Sophia. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I went to the window and stared at the street below. People going to work, a delivery truck unloading boxes, a man walking his dog. The ordinary life I'd been chasing for years. I wondered if I'd ever get it. That night, I sat alone at my apartment, the case files spread across my dining table. Photos, transcripts, financial records. A map of every move he'd made. The Bureau would use it to bury him. But I knew him. He didn't believe in burial. He believed in resurrection. The front door buzzed. Rivera's voice came through the intercom. "Open up, Danielle. We need to talk." When I let her in, she dropped a manila envelope onto the table. "This came in this afternoon. Addressed to you." No return address, but we traced the courier service. Cash payment, no ID. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence typed in bold. "A locked door only matters if you can't find the key." No signature. No name. But I didn't need either. Rivera watched my face. "We'll increase security. Put you in protective housing if we have to." I shook my head. "No. That's what he wants. For me to live like a prisoner while he roams free in people's minds." "So what's your plan?" I folded the paper slowly. "We finish what we started." Completely. The next weeks blurred into a cycle of court appearances, depositions, and late-night strategy sessions with the Bureau's legal team. Every time I stepped into the courtroom, I could feel his eyes on me from the defense table. Calm, calculating, as though he still believed the ending was his to write. And maybe that's what kept me going. The need to prove beyond any doubt that my story would not be dictated by the man who tried to destroy me. The verdict came on a cold Friday afternoon. Guilty. On all counts. As the judge read the sentence, decades without parole, I felt something loosen in my chest, a weight I'd carried for years shifting just enough for me to breathe. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. Instead, I looked up at the sky, the same gray sky that had hung over my graduation years ago when his text told me I was on my own. Only this time I wasn't. Rivera stood beside me. Sophia waited at home. And for the first time, the future felt like mine. I turned to the nearest camera and said the only thing I wanted the world to hear. To anyone who's ever been told they can't, let this be proof that they can. Have you ever been underestimated only to prove them wrong? Share your story below. I read every comment. If Danielle's journey inspired you, tap that like button so more people can see it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got more stories you'll never forget.